welcome to After the Session, Season 0, Episode 3, with producer, mixer, artist, Ken Andrews. You know Ken's work with Blink-182, Jimmy Eat World, Paramore, M83, BECK, Black Rebel Motorcycle Club, 9 Inch Nails, A Perfect Circle, the Bond theme with Chris Cornell, You Know My Name, I think it was called, his work with Tenacious D. You also know him from his own bands, the legendary Failure, as well as On, Year of the Rabbit, his solo work as Ken Andrews, the Replicants. Let me start by saying I am a huge fan of Ken's work. Years ago, I first discovered Failure, and it really kind of helped define my tastes in what I like in a rock mix. And I really think there are very few people out in the world that are parallel to him and his ability to make things sound the way I want to hear them. There's just such ridiculous power and mid-range in his mixes. I have no idea how he manages to pull it off. As a bit of an aside, I first met Ken in about 2007, I think it was. I was working with a band here based out of San Diego called First Wave Hello. And long story short, I had the opportunity or got the opportunity to play drums with Ken, be his drummer for a portion of that tour. And I must say, hanging out with him during that time and playing those shows was definitely one of the highlights of my musical career. Being able to play some of those songs on stage was a big deal for me. And it was also a really cool opportunity to get to know him. He's a good dude, really talented. I can't say enough good things about the guy. So, quick disclaimer. In the podcast, I hate to be this guy, but I got to tell you, our Pro Tools rig went down before we could start the podcast, and we were running out of time. So Ken had the idea that we could all, there were 3 of us in there, that we could all set up our iPhones and sync them after the fact, try to do like a multi-track with our iPhones. It actually sounded like a pretty cool idea. So we went for it, and the theory of it was better than the reality of how it turned out. So I know you guys are probably a lot of you guys are aware of fidelity in recordings, and I got to tell you, this is a little subpar from what we've done here so far. But the conversation is good. It's not that bad, and it's enjoyable to listen to. So here it is. We're going to present it anyways. I apologize for that, you audiophile engineers, you. So with that, make sure you subscribe to the podcast in iTunes. If you want to talk to me, get me on Twitter @EarsCummings or email me afterthesession@gmail.com, or you can head over to the website christiancummings.com. Enjoy After the Session, Season 0, Episode 3 with Ken Andrews.
If you come inside, things will not be the same when you return. And in the night, you hear me calling. You hear me
Ken, thank you for being on the podcast. Patrick's here too, my buddy.
Nice to be here.
Ken, producer,
Likewise.
engineer, producer, mixer, artist. Thank you for being on the podcast.
Yeah, my pleasure.
You know, we just kind of BS about producing and mixing, and sometimes nothing related to that whatsoever.
Okay.
What are you working on these days? Obviously, you're on tour because we're backstage at the venue right now here in San Diego.
Yep, Failure's taking up most of my time right now. I'm mixing a couple rock records. Both actually totally unknown bands.
Those can be some of the funnest projects, though.
Well,
sometimes.
yeah, one I'm actually really kind of developing with the band, and they've kind of decided to make their debut album which is a very ambitious project. They have a very ambitious sound. It's an amazing album.
Is it?
But they wanted to do that first, establish their sound, and then get into the promotional aspect.
Right.
So it's always a
almost
weird
like-
thing when people ask you, what are you working on? Well, I'm working on a band you will never have heard of, because if you search their name, nothing will come up.
Yeah.
They don't have a Facebook yet.
So they're developing? Like, would you say
Well-
the development process is happening as you're making the
I call it
recordings?
developing because they don't have a manager or, really anyone helping them out at this point with the business stuff. And technically I'm really only mixing the record.
Right.
But I've had a lot of input into what things that would be considered producing, like a few arrangements, a couple ideas for changing the instrumentation on a few songs.
Right.
But for the most part, they're extremely accomplished musicians.
Right.
And it does not sound like a debut album at all. It sounds like a whole kind of new style of rock.
So,
actually.
like, you couldn't even... It'd be hard... If I asked you, and which is a question I hate to ask a lot of times, is to define it. Or what does it sound like? You couldn't... is it kind of one of those things that takes a minute to get
I would say in this particular case, the fact that you cannot put it in a specific genre is one of the top reasons why I agreed to do it. Yeah. It's super attractive that it's like they're trying to push the envelope with rock songs. It's still a rock band.
So live drums.
Yep.
Okay.
Guitar, bass, drums is the main instrumentation. They do have some keyboards coming in and out, and vocals, obviously.
Right.
But it's what's different about them is their arrangements. Their songs are average around 6 or 7 minutes long. So you immediately think maybe they're like a proggy type band, but it's not prog because it's not instrumental in nature. It's very vocal and lyric driven, but they tend not to repeat sections.
Okay.
Or parts. That instead of like A B C A B C D, which is usually like the standard rock arrangement.
Right.
It goes A B C D E F G H I.
So it's like linear, beginning to end, kind of.
Yeah, but what's intriguing is that even though they're not repeating sections, you never feel like it's a schizophrenic or not flowing arrangement. I'm constantly amazed that they get into the 5th and 6th section of a song. You haven't heard either of those before, and yet you're in the same song.
Right.
So there is no
and you're
lulls
excited.
without lyrics. There's no long droney parts that kind of take up 2 minutes of time throughout the entire thing.
I mean, sometimes they'll have a 1 or 2 minute intro where it's maybe some sound design and interesting, like, lyrics being read, or maybe there's the singer is an incredibly creative person. He is by trade right now, his day job is he's a fine artist. He's a painter.
Whoa.
So he comes at this whole band project from a super artistic place.
Okay.
And it's all about the art to him. It's all about, like, if there's any, like, bar of music that is not interesting to him, it gets fixed.
That's
you know,
awesome.
like it's like super. Every he sweats the details on every little thing, and it really shows. I'm just super excited for it to come out.
when
We're
you-
almost done. We're
Yeah.
we're about probably 4 to 5 days of recalls left, and it's to give you an idea of how ambitious sonically it is. There's only 12 songs on the record, and it took me about 3 months to mix this record.
Oh my
It was
god!
averaging 3 to 4 days per song.
Wow.
Because
What's
of-
your usual speed? Like in
One day.
relation, so a day a song.
One day is totally average. I mean, every once in a while it goes a little longer. Every once in a while, I've got a really good mix in 3 or 4 hours.
Yeah.
But generally, it's like one day I've got a decent mix in 3 or 4 hours, and then I'm tweaking for another 3 or 4 hours usually.
Right.
But this is like I couldn't even get the instruments done in a day because they would have so many sections that are just it's brand new. You
and
know
it's
what I mean?
constantly morphing, so you're constantly going, oh, well, what I had working here is no longer working, so then you're having to adjust accordingly, I'm guessing.
Yeah,
Having
it's just like you get to a new. I mean, the way I mix, the way my brain works with mixing is that I kind of look at the song as divided up by sections, right? You know, so I mix by section. So if I mix, when I'm mixing, I generally mix the last chorus or outro or both of those two things first. Because that's generally going to be in rock. That's generally going to be the loudest,
The highest energy spot.
the
in
highest
song.
energy spot, and the
Most
densest.
of this, stuff's happening there.
Yeah, the most mouths to feed sonically is usually in that last out chorus. So if your gain structures are right there, then you're going to be fine for the rest of the song.
Right.
But with these guys, that doesn't really work because they'll have like 2 or 3 sections within the song that are high energy, but in different ways. You know, a whole different approach to the singing will happen where you can't really use almost anything of your settings to copy over. You know, for different sections and stuff. It's super appealing to me as a listener and as a fan, as someone working on it. It's actually hard, and I'm actually worried about how they're going to do it live.
Okay.
So they're from Vancouver, so I'm going to be going up there this fall and starting
Hanging
to
out with
work
them for
with
a little bit.
in rehearsal.
Yeah.
How to bring this album to the stage.
That seems to be something you are very good at and very experienced at is taking musical concepts and then kind of transporting them to the stage. I mean, just by looking at your show right now, Failure, it's very ethereal and very visual, and it feels very correct for the music. So you have a visual arts background, right? I mean, a little bit.
I'm actually not worried about the visual part with this band because the singer is an artist.
Okay.
And he's already started shooting videos
Right.
for the first few songs that they're going to put out there. It's more about sonically, how do they get this really ambitious sound in a
to have
club.
different builds.
Yeah. And I'm like, there's a lot of different guitar tones and stuff, and is the guitarist going to be capable of recreating those tones live, as varied as they are? And the dynamics and the vocals, because there's a lot of vocal layering that the singer has done, and it's definitely him on all the tracks. So are the other guys going to try to cover that, or are we going to have to pick and choose what parts
happen
for live?
Right.
For sure.
Are they the kind of band that would be open to using some digital tech in their live shows and stuff?
I don't think so.
No.
I don't. They want to, and the album feels very played.
Okay.
It's not sequency. I mean, I think they probably did use metronomes, to track and stuff, but it's not an electronic.
You don't
vibe.
feel it very programmed, not too much like machine music in there.
No,
stuff.
actually, now that I remember it, there's a lot of tempo and time signature changes.
Okay.
But I see them doing that just live
On the
because
fly.
they're good musicians.
Yeah.
The drummer's really incredible.
Younger
actually.
dudes? Older dudes?
No. I'm pretty sure. I don't even know the whole band's history.
Yeah,
I kind of don't want to know until it's done.
Yeah.
But
No, I get that. You don't want that to pollute where you're at.
yeah, because when they sent me their 3 songs, the first 3 demos, I was just like, I mean, you know, I get things sent to me, and certain things really stick out.
Right.
And that one stuck out immediately. Like his voice and the lyrics and just the whole presentation was really unique. So I just wanted to dive into it in that headspace.
Right.
I didn't want to be like
Overthinking
what
it.
bands, you know, because clearly they've been in bands.
Yeah.
There's no way. They're like early 30s. And they're really accomplished at what they're playing. There's no way they haven't been in some. I'm sure somebody's been in a punk band or.
They're from Canada. I'm always amazed. I'm amazed at how many bands I find out that I love that are from Canada. It's Canada or overseas or Sweden or something like that. It just seems like Canada
just seems to
breeds
breed
awesome
them.
artists. I'm not
Well,
sure
they
what it is.
finance them, you know.
Yeah.
They really do. They give them loans and stuff.
Right.
Yeah,
It's easier, I think,
to do that.
I mean, that's a bit of a different conversation, but it seems like it might be a little easier to just commit to being a musician in Canada than it is in, say, the United States or in other places. You know.
Yeah.
Because a little bit of more social support. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
That's cool, man. You're still all in the box? It's my understanding that you're doing most of your work in the box, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. I've been there for at least
Wow.
4 years, I think.
Yeah, when we actually talked, we were going back.
Pat,
and
you
forth.
talked to him about doing a record with you? Or something?
Yeah. We talked about doing my first album, and I was like, man, I really wanted to mix this album. I really wanted it. And I wrote back. I was like, would you take this amount of money plus 4 1176s? And you're like, I'm getting rid of everything right now.
right.
I don't need more outboard gear.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I was like, yeah.
Yeah. No, those are good units, but yeah, I mean, like on this latest Failure record, it was pretty much mic pre's to Pro Tools.
That's it, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I do a lot of compression after the fact.
Mm-hmm.
But I've kind of learned that I prefer, with vocals, I'll definitely track compression because I want to get a healthier level in there,
Right.
and not worry about clipping the input.
Right.
But with drums, I just find that loudest where the loudest hits are, and then it just gives you more to play with later. In terms of how hard you're going to compress things later, not being locked into a snare already being compressed.
Yep.
So
That's cool. I think I've learned from some of my mentors and guys that I've worked with that I've really looked up to tend to do a lot less on the way in than I think a lot of people suspect.
especially with the maybe with the drums, because it's such an important element in most rock bands. You don't want to paint yourself in a corner.
Right.
Once you've recorded the main tracks, like the rhythm section and some guitars and stuff, and then you're doing like some maybe percussion overdubs, I'll be way more adventurous at that point.
Right.
Because I can hear the bed.
Yeah.
And I can
know
hear
what
how
space
that's
you
going to
have,
fit in.
and,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I'll get more aggressive with compression and maybe even effects or something.
Right.
going
I think that's
in.
really cool to hear it, from someone like you, and also you. Like I love doing that style of just using, as more of a safety net than anything. Just so you're not clipping everything, but you do have so much fun going in there and actually shaping sounds afterwards instead of being locked in, like you said.
I mean, and yeah.
There's
'cause-
nothing worse than recording a kick drum a certain way and having it being a certain way, and then listening to it after you get the bass and guitars down and going, "Holy shit, this isn't going to work." Then that's horrible. It's a bad spot to be.
Or you're just and you end up, or if you want, you end up wanting to gate it or something, and you can't anymore because you've pulled up the noise floor in between the hits.
Right.
Which is part and parcel of what compression is.
Right. Narrowing the dynamic range. Yeah.
Yeah, you're just narrowing the dynamic range, and
Do you tend to use compression for tone? Do you use it for level control? Do you use it for all of the above?
All of the above.
Yeah.
Yeah, it depends on the instrument.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the most recent thing that I've actually engineered and produced is this last recent Failure Records. That's what's fresh in my mind. Took a kind of interesting approach on that record, in the sense that we were looking around for studios and even houses to rent, to move in, because our style of recording is that we don't prepare material before we go into the studio. We go in and just write and record at the same time, one song at a time.
Right.
So, we're kind of working on parts, and then we get to the point where, like, I'm pretty happy with this arrangement. Let's start laying down some drums.
Mm-hmm.
And the studio we ended up in was a former Foley studio, a Technicolor Foley
studio. I saw photos
studio.
of that. I wanted to ask you what the deal is with that place, because I've seen it in your feed on Instagram and
It's a great room.
Yeah.
I mean, neither of the rooms though had a roomy sound, or what people would typically describe as a good room to record live drums in. Even the big room was very controlled, and you did like a lot of, not carpeting, but like just
deadening
material on the walls and stuff, so not a lot of reflections. Great for mixing and listening to things in there.
Right.
So, and then there was a smaller control room, pretty small control room, probably like the size of this area right here.
Did you have to?
So the question was, where are we going to put the drums and why?
Yeah.
Which room? Like, are we going to put them in the small room or the big room? The big room makes sense, and use the control room as the control room, right?
Right. Yeah.
But then I was like, if we're not really, I had Kelly, the drummer, set up a kick, snare, and hat and just play in the big room, and I put a pair of 414s in the room, as far away as I could get from him, which is probably like 20 feet away or something. And I listened to it, and I was just like, it's not really that live.
It's not doing too much different than if you're up close. Yeah, you're not hearing something different there that you need.
There's nothing really there, so I was like, well, if we're not really going to be recording useful ambient mics on the drums, why not just go all the other way and just try to get it completely dead room with no ambience?
Oh, interesting, yeah.
The control room for that studio, the 2-room thing, was one of the quietest or deadest rooms I've ever been in. I mean, you couldn't even hear yourself breathe in there. It was crazy.
Yeah.
Or you could hear yourself breathe.
Yeah.
Because it was so...
You hear your, like,
no
heartbeat
reflections
in your head.
Yeah. Like, what do they call it? Anechoic chamber?
Anechoic chamber, where there's very, very little ambient sound.
God, it was incredible.
It's kind of creepy, actually.
A little creepy, yeah.
It gives some people vertigo when they get
Yeah.
But that's got to be a great kind of situation to mix in, too, because you can probably hear some serious detail in a room that quiet.
Very frustrating room.
Maybe that's it, too.
So basically, we decided to put the drums in there.
Okay.
And, I mean, the drums didn't have more than 4 or 5 feet of clearance around, so there was really even no place to even put ambient mics or distant mics, whatever you want to call them. So the focus became getting the close mics to sound really good and fat, and capturing the full picture of each individual drum. So
did you use the same mics across the record, or did you change them up from song to song on the drums?
I used the same thing, and we didn't really change the drums up either too much. We kind of stuck with the same drum sound for most of the album. I mean, we did do some dramatic changes on a few songs, like maybe the snares would be off for a section of some song, something really kind of dramatic like that.
Do you recall some of the mics you were using? Pretty normal stuff, or
pretty normal stuff? I mean, and actually, you could probably look at the mics on the drum kit tonight, and it's pretty much the same.
Gotta be the same stuff.
It was.
Are those your mics out there? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you're probably touring with your own stuff.
Yeah, we're touring with our own stuff.
Yeah.
It's just easier.
Yeah.
Audix D6 inside. NS10 woofer on the outside.
Normal.
With
57s.
57 on bottom snare. Didn't use a 57 on the top. We used the Audix i5.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because
That's
it's
cool.
has a little bit better rejection behind it for hi-hat stuff.
Right.
And then put I think a 451 tape to it
Snare.
for snare top. So 3 mics on the snare. Again, the Audix sort of tom mics for the tops of the toms. Oh no, sorry. No, I think I actually landed on 421s.
Okay.
For the toms, top and bottom.
It was a 4-piece, right? 2 toms.
Yeah, 2 toms.
Yeah.
So
you did top and bottom.
top. I'm super into that.
Yeah, it's cool.
I'm super into that with Kelly or loud cymbal playing drummers.
Yeah.
Because if you set it up right, you basically are using 50% of the top and 50% of the bottom. But the benefit is that the one on the bottom isn't getting any cymbal bleed.
Right.
So you're ending up with overall 50% less cymbal bleed than you would normally have in your total sound.
Right.
And you could do this trick where you can, in the mix, have a sharper release on the top.
And get the bottom to ring a little more.
You know, about like really quite short.
Yeah.
And the bottom is going dome.
Yeah.
And let that one go out quite a bit before it closes down.
I've experimented with that technique quite a bit. I really like it too, but yeah, you're right. It's a rock drum thing. I think it's not as valuable when you're not just bashing away the drums and
if you have a light drummer and a light playing drummer and you can leave your tom mics open and it's not that big of a deal. Although I still like to have bottom mics usually if I'm recording. It adds some volume
too, right?
It gets it more low mids basically.
Right.
You know.
So what mics did you use for the bottoms?
For 421s.
On both top and bottom?
Both top and bottom for toms.
And I'm going to guess you used either 414s as overheads or KM84s.
KM84s.
Yep.
Yeah.
Can't go wrong with
KM184s.
them, yeah. Well, the 184s.
KM184s and then 451 on hi-hat and ride cymbal.
Okay.
Which it's literally the only difference between the live setup tonight and the album was the toms. Because 421s, the Sennheiser 421s, it's very hard to use clamps with those.
Oh yeah, they're awful.
Because they're huge.
They really are.
Yeah.
And I don't like mic stands around the drum kit for live.
Those things are fucking evil.
Yeah.
The clips are the worst.
The clips always falling out and stuff, and But to me, to my ear, that mic is the sound of rock toms.
Right.
For some reason, every time I've tried different ones,
kind of revert to it.
And I always revert to that.
I've been on a similar journey, and every time I kind of get away from the 57 on the snare and try to do something different, I always end up back to the 57. I can't find anything that.
You should try the i5.
I will.
It's got a similar.
I never really thought about that too much. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an instrument mic that they recommend it for snare. It's just a hair darker. And it's the rejection or the pattern gives you more rejection behind, specifically the hi-hat.
So is it like a hypercardioid kind of thing, or is it just that the rejection's really good on the back of the cardioid pattern? Something like that, yeah.
Something like that. All I know is that we used it with no blocking mechanism for live. It's just kind of normally where a 57 would be, but the amount of hi-hat bleed is easily half of what a 57 is.
And you like to keep hat out of the snare and snare out of the hat. That's an important
I
thing
mean,
for
my
you.
whole thing on this record with Kelly was just to get the drums as isolated as possible on each track. And then what I'm doing in the mix is creating the ambiences with about 3 or 4 instances of altiverb.
Oh, interesting.
I've got a small room, a medium room, a large room, and a nonlinear
Like an RMX.
and RMX thing
EMS
for
thing.
snare and for top toms.
Okay.
But it's all blended subtly in, and I've got this kind of little formula of like
It's like your
mixing
little
these.
reverb palette.
I got my reverb palette.
Yeah.
I literally use the same. Oh, sorry. I should take that back. There's one. It's 5. It's actually 5. I used Ocean Way.
The UAD thing.
The UAD.
That thing's awesome.
That thing is incredible.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things. It's like I feel like the reverb modeling or whatever it's called, IR based reverb.
Impulse response. Yeah.
Has gotten to the point where it's just it sounds amazing.
Right.
And so the idea of recording individual drums as separated as you can in a dry space is a viable method.
Option. As opposed to having all your ambient mics and trying to work that all in the process you can get away with.
Yeah, and it just gives you so much more control in the mix to
But that's not
have
how-
scene changes.
Oh yeah, like you were talking about, because you feel like you're mixing in different sections. So you can say, I'm switching from the ambience in section in the verse, and in the chorus I have the same recorded drum kit but present it to you in a different way.
I'm adding another level of ambience
right
in different sections and maybe taking away some. And if you listen to the record, there's actually some really radical sounding scene changes where it goes from a sort of a more normal sounding like rock ambient. You know, there's a nice sort of like crack to the snare into a room to a totally dry, like bone dry, to the point where people were like, "Oh, I didn't know you guys were using drum machine on this record." But it's fully played.
Yeah.
It's just I'm trying to think. There's like either 2 or 3 songs on the album where the verses are basically
I'm hearing one of them right now in my head, I think, and I can't think of the name of it.
Yeah,
It's awesome.
That's what the drum kit sounded like that I recorded.
Okay, that's your bass. That's the bass.
That's it. I mean, it's incredibly dry.
But no, correct me if I'm wrong, but your approach to drum recording prior to this has not
Been
it's
that.
just kind of the opposite of that,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Well, I've done this a couple times now.
Okay. Because when I think of the original, some of the older Failure stuff, I think
Big Room.
I think Big Room.
Yeah, no, for sure.
And that set the tone for a lot of records after that too, man.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Other people's records.
And there's
that.
still-
I don't need to tell you how much I love the drum sound on that stuff.
Yeah,
How's everything going in here?
good.
More ice?
We're
okay.
Cool.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, sorry.
It's still this. Sorry.
Oh, you're doing an interview.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It's still kind of the same thing. I'm just creating it artificially, you know, with the reverbs.
And you feel you can do that. That's
like-
the interesting part of the conversation to me, that you feel that you can supplant some of that mic recording stuff with IR verbs.
Yeah,
That's
and
cool,
you get
man.
more. I mean, you get it's not a subtle thing. You get a lot more control when you do it this way.
Yeah, it sounds
know?
like you get tons of control.
Because you're controlling what's going into those room mics, your fake room mics,
Right.
right? They're on a send.
Yeah, you can EQ. You can EQ into them, EQ out of them.
And often what I do is once
ever-
I'm happy with them, I print them as audio tracks and group them with my drums as if they were actual room mics.
Right.
So late in the mix, I'm not really having to automate sends or returns on tracks. I'm literally cutting regions and muting out regions
Yeah.
and putting fades on them so it sounds
They're turning
smooth.
on and off as
They're turning
needed.
on and off, and you get bolder with your drum moves when everything's printed out like that.
Yeah.
I find.
Yeah. Do you like using a lot of bus compression too, or are you doing a lot of that directly on the tracks? Because there's definitely a good amount of compression in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it's a combination of both.
Okay.
For sure. I mean, There's generally on the individual tracks there's some compression for sure. I'm a big fan of the SSL Waves channels for drums.
That compressor is really nice.
It's funny. I just feel like the G channel in particular is just, it seems like it was made for drums.
Right.
I kind of have a hard time using it on other things.
Right.
I don't really like it for other things. I don't really like the EQ for guitars or vocals or anything, but for drums, you can't beat the expander.
Yep.
On that thing is incredible for drums.
Right. It's very grabby, but in a very nice way. That VCA compressor on it sounds like it's like done pretty quickly. Yeah.
And the filters, everything about it. I have lots of presets for the G channel that I built over the years for kick, snare, tom, stuff like that.
Uh-huh.
I can usually pull up one of those and as a starting point for almost any drum. Yeah.
What are some of your favorite plugins right now? Do you have like stuff that you can't live without? Anything like that?
Well, that one is like a mainstay of drum mixing for sure.
Uh-huh.
I'm generally using that. That's like a little suite of plugins, including the bus compressor from the 4K console. I'm generally using that or something similar to it on the bus. I'm also a big fan of the Waves NLS, which is their harmonic generating
nonlinear summer,
like that. Yeah, that thing is awesome. I will use that stems and the entire left-right bus as well.
Right. So you'll send that. Do you send stuff down to some auxes? Like, so you'll have like a main drum aux and a main guitar aux, and then you'll NLS those guys.
Yeah,
right?
I'll NLS them or Phoenix them.
I love that plugin. That would be one of my Desert Island plugins.
Oh, that's a Desert Island.
I haven't found anything that can replace that. Even the amazing tape emulators that people are putting out these days, it's still not the same thing as the Phoenix. The Phoenix is cool.
No, the Phoenix is. Love the Phoenix. Definitely have at least 10 instances of that in a rock mix. You know, on stems, on individual tracks.
Right.
I mean,
I preach that plugin to people all the time.
There's so many times I'll put up a guitar.
Pat's like, stop talking about it. Yeah.
Yeah, there's. I listen to a guitar. If someone sends me something to mix, I put up a guitar track, and I'm like, Phoenix, and I'm done.
That's it.
That's it.
Yeah.
If it needs heavy brightening, it's not going to happen with the Phoenix.
Right.
It can do some brightening.
Yeah.
But like, if it's thin and it just needs a little bit more girth, I mean, oh man.
Do you have a particular one of those instances you like? Oh, the newer one, the Phoenix 2 has it all grouped on the one knob, so you can switch between the different modes.
Yeah, and I use them all.
Yeah. Okay.
Depending on.
Kind of switch through them until you go. Oh, there we go.
Yep.
Yeah.
But I can usually land on the one I want. But without listening to it, like I can hear. Oh, this one needs the.
I don't remember the
Dark
names.
Essence.
Yeah.
Or this one needs the.
Iridescent.
Yeah, that's the brighter one.
Right.
The slightly more. Or I shouldn't say brighter, more neutral.
Right.
It's not adding a lot of thickness in the lows.
Yeah. That one, I like that one. I use the Dark Essence a lot, and then the other one's a little less than those two. But yeah.
I've started to use the in between ones a lot now. Yeah, for different things.
Dark Essence is a little heavy handed sometimes, but it's
it
pretty
can
dope.
be. Yeah, and the one just before it is really good too.
I forget which.
I forget the name of that one. Yeah, I love that plugin.
Yeah.
I mean, on individual tracks, I definitely use that a lot. I like the Slate Virtual Mix Rack.
Okay. Yeah.
It's got like 4 or 5 things. The knee VQ in that suite is amazing.
Okay.
For brightening.
Haven't tried it yet, but I've heard good things.
For brightening guitars, vocals, anything like that, it has a shelf that's fixed. I don't even know what it's fixed at, 12 or 10 probably.
It's modeled after the 1073. I think that's 12. Right? Or no?
I don't know if it's modeled after a 1081 or a 1073.
Okay.
It sounds like a 1073 sonically, but it seems to have a little more capability than a 1073.
Like he took the sonics of the 1073 and added some more spots on the EQ.
Yeah, there's like the high pass is totally variable.
Yeah, gotcha.
It's not like detented at certain fixed frequencies, but there's something about the shelf boost and the high mid boost that is like, it's just amazing. It's not just brightening it. There's some harmonics in there.
Yeah, it adds quite a bit. I mean,
and you don't have to add much at all. Like a dB.
One or two of those little tiny dots that are on there. It's crazy.
And shit just comes alive. Yeah.
Well, if I'm not mistaken, Pat, those dots are each. I think that it's like plus 18, and it'll go positive 18 dB and positive or negative 18. Maybe not. It might be 12, but there's a lot of room in between those dots. Like you're doing a lot.
I rarely get higher than like 2 dB of boost on them.
He made them so they're these little tiny ones now. So they're not. It's
I'll have
not.
to check that out.
It's weird. He doesn't have them as how they were, and that's I think why he did it, because so many people complain about going.
Oh,
it's too extreme. Yeah. This I don't like the API plugins that follow the hardware restriction of plus two every time. I basically can't use those EQs.
Yeah,
because I need the in between.
I use those things all the time for where I do a lot of my recording. We have a 1608 32 channel loaded with those things, and I love them, but they do require that you kind of almost add and cut at the same time in different ways to get where you want to go, and it's a thing. It's not a surgical. Like if you want,
it's cool for tracking because you can be a little more, gross with your movements when you're tracking, and then fine tune things in the mix. But for mixing, I can't. Why did they do that? I don't understand.
I don't know.
Even the UAD one did that.
Yeah, well, UAD is going to be all about just making exactly the same.
Yeah.
And I'm actually all in on that UAD stuff. I can't live without it right now.
I like that stuff too. I've gotten it only in the last year, so I'm still finding my way around which ones I am going to buy and stuff. Yeah. The ones that I definitely used a lot on Hard as a Monster is the Ocean Way Room. Right. And the MXR flanger. Really? That cool. Rack mount, that is my favorite plug-in flanger by a mile. Period. Yeah. Yeah. The stereo mode on it is massive. Really? Yeah. The bass guitar on I Can See Houses, the last full song on the record is all of that, yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, they've gotten a lot of my money and probably continue to get it for some reason. I keep getting suckered in. They do a good job. That 1073 emulation they released this year is amazing. I got that. That's the other one. Yeah, I've used that a lot. It takes a lot of juice. I'm running an Octo right now, and it's still sometimes I wish I had more when I'm using that thing. So that's my chief complaint, but whatever. It is what it is. I don't want to keep you too late. I know you got a dinner to get to. Mm-hmm. Just if you have any other questions, I could hold you for forever, man. I really appreciate you doing this. Let's keep talking about nerdy recording stuff. What? The other thing that's made a big change in my world is the fractal axe effects. Oh, did you use that in recording? Yep. Really? Yep. Because I wasn't necessarily planning on it, but we ended up doing some touring before we recorded the lion's share of the record. Mm-hmm. The first thing we did was record 5 new songs before we even announced that we were back together, because we wanted to know that we could be a viable band again. Right. Instead of just coming out and doing like a nostalgia tour. Right. And then calling it quits. We really wanted to come back. If we're going to do it, let's do it all the way. Right. So the first thing was, let's write some new songs and see if it makes make us happy with the quality or whatever. So we did that, and that was before I got. You're probably knowing you guys are probably your toughest critics too. Yeah. So we were happy with those. I used all my normal amps on that stuff. Then we booked a show, and then we ended up doing a few more shows. It was Tool took us out for a couple weeks. Mm-hmm. And it became like, oh my God, we're going to have to play live. Like, how are we going to do this? Like, because the last time Failure played live was in 1997, and we had these giant, enormous rigs of pedals in racks and Bradshaw switching systems and multiple cabinets, and
I remember you telling me about that system several years ago, and
they were just
playing.
nightmares.
Yeah, like weren't you telling me you had like I don't even know anything about those? And you have a big MIDI controller that would switch pedals on and off and all that shit. Was that
Yep.
how that thing worked? Yeah. Yeah,
But it
sounds
would
like
also
that sounds like
switch-
a pain in the ass, and it sounds like a lot could go wrong.
And it did.
Yeah.
Constantly breaking down during shows sometimes, and
Right.
to troubleshoot those things, and they had a mile of cable in them.
And not to disrespect that piece of gear, I'm sure it was an amazing piece of gear at that point in time, especially
Yeah.
probably really well built and everything. But
as good as they could
yeah.
be made.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
And they, you know, when it was working properly and the temperature was right, like it sounded pretty cool for like 5 different sounds.
Yeah.
Yeah, now
Yeah.
it cuts to 2014, and we're going to have to cover 3 albums with the material plus new songs.
Right.
We don't have even half of that equipment anymore.
Yeah.
It's either broken or been sold off. I mean, the idea of trying to rebuild those rigs was just like really daunting. So I started
15
calling.
years ago, right?
Yeah. So I started calling my friends and asking, what's the status of amp modeling these days? There's no plug-in that I've heard that can work in Pro Tools that's acceptable for me versus real amps. And that's when my buddy Billy Howardell from Perfect Circle was like, have you heard of Fractal Audio? And they make this thing called the Axe Effects. And I was like, no. And then another one of my friends said, have you heard of Kemper? Which is another
the
modeling-
Kemper amp profiler.
amp profiler. So basically, I got my hands on both of those units and took them into my studio and shot them out for about 10 days. I mean, I was also relearning all these failure songs and kind of like building patches and seeing what I could do with those units. They're both a cut above anything I'd ever heard.
Right.
In terms of, you know, a pod-like product.
Right.
I mean, they definitely had kind of cracked the ceiling on that whole thing. They felt like they had the sensitivity of real amps. You could roll off your volume and get different tones, and it just felt like amps to me.
Okay. So you felt like the convenience factor probably outweighed some of the tone factor, or you just didn't even feel like it was a sacrifice at all?
I didn't feel like it was a sacrifice at all.
Yeah.
And in fact, I was so excited because, I mean, the Fractal has like 150 amps in it. I only have 5 amps, you know? It had all these amps that I wanted to buy and could never afford, you know?
Yeah.
And to my ear, and I had recorded a lot of those amps from other bands that owned them and stuff, so I was familiar with how they sounded, and I was like, holy shit, I have a diesel now.
Yeah.
You know, if I want to do get my metal on.
A $4,000
A $4,000 head,
Yeah.
you know?
And traveling is.
And then you could stack up the heads, you know, you have a diesel on one side and Marshall on the other side. They each have their own cabinet, different mics, and it's all sounding really good to my ear. And the dynamics and playability of it was all there. And it was only at that point it was only a matter of picking between Kemper and Fractal. And for my money, I like the sound of the Fractal a little bit better.
Right.
And I also like the deepness of the programming options on it. It does take about a week to learn it, so you can get around it quickly. The Kemper was easier on the first day for sure.
Right.
And then if you already have a bunch of sounds that you really have dialed in, analog setups that you like, the Kemper's probably better because it can take a picture of those.
Right, you can capture your favorite amp.
Fractal, you can capture your favorite cabinet, but you can't really. You can make an IR of your cabinet, but you can't really make a model of your own head.
Right.
But the other side of that is they have 150 heads already in there. Chances are your model is already in there.
Yeah.
I have a 1966 JTM 45 that's probably worth $8,000 or $10,000 now.
Right.
It's in really good condition. It sounds great. I A/B'd it against the Fractal has like maybe four different versions or years of that same exact head.
Yeah.
I like theirs.
Really?
I like theirs better.
That's a pretty solid endorsement.
You know, it was like I I like one tone that my head gets, but I can get it with the fractal.
Right.
The other versions in there get different tones that my head can't get.
Right.
You know? And so, we're using, in this failure show, we're using 3 fractals for 3 guitar players. 2 of them are playing bass.
Right.
Also, great bass amps in
So you
there.
can just say, "Hey, I'm going over to my bass rig," and you just hit a button on your fractal, and you're there.
You're there. Well, button on the pedal board, the MIDI pedal board that controls the fractal.
Right.
Yeah, just goes to the next song, and then the next song has the bass amps instead of guitar amps. But if you really look at this, the set, it's like 20 songs. We're using probably over 20 different heads in this set.
Which is obviously something you couldn't even come remotely close to doing any other way.
I mean, and probably about 15 different speaker cabinets.
Right. Right.
Like combining an 810 with a 115.
Yeah.
And a 412 for some of the bass sounds.
Right.
It's like that's like a truck in itself right there.
Do you run keyboards through any of that stuff too, or no?
I do in the studio.
Yeah.
But and vocals. Because
cool.
if you want to get some dirty vocals,
Pipe them
through there, and you've got access to all these stomp boxes and heads and cabinets, and you can get any flavor of overdrive that you could possibly imagine out of that box. The flexibility, it just all added up to like, this is how we're going. Then it became an issue of like, well, how are we going to monitor that stuff on stage? I was already really used to in-ears from other projects. And Kelly had been on in-ears for at least 5 or 6 years already. Greg had never used them, so we had to bring him up to speed. He loved it. Once we did a few ears rehearsals, it became like, hey, that's the way we're going to go.
It's got to be better for you personally too, and better for the health of your ears too. I would think. Yeah.
I just love playing a 2-hour-long rock show and going back to the hotel and my ears aren't ringing. I can listen to quiet TV. Or talk to someone on the phone quietly.
I've been a drummer pretty much my entire life, and I learned, thankfully, early on to protect my ears. But a lot of my friends haven't been so lucky at this point. You got to be careful.
You got to be careful.
Very
for
careful.
Sure.
I really appreciate you being on the podcast. We've been going here for a little while. I don't want to hold you up too late.
No worries. My pleasure.
Pat, do you have any questions, any thoughts, anything you want to add?
Nothing. It was actually
Very informative.
Yeah, it was extremely informative.
Yeah.
A lot of small things that I always think like, man, a lot of people probably don't like this or use this, and you're like, no, I fucking love doing this. And I'm like, okay, now I can vocalize about that. I don't have to cower down.
Oh yeah, there's so much of that, like, I'll never use an amp modeler, or I'll never use a plug-in or something, it's just like, even Jack White uses Pro Tools.
You seem to have moved past that a little while ago. You can
I'm
don't give a shit about that.
I don't give a shit. I just, the other thing about it that people don't always think about is it saves a lot of money.
Oh yeah.
Because you're talking about weight and fuel, and the other thing that we're able to do because of amp modeling is that we don't have a backline anymore, right? We don't have the traditional line of amps lined up with the drum riser.
Right. So you have all the stage space.
So we have all that space.
Right.
And we have that space in the trailer now, right?
Uh-huh.
Light panels.
Yeah.
And that really affects the show.
Oh, yeah.
Like the average person in the audience does not appreciate the difference between a real tube amp and a one model.
Yeah, exactly. Are the LED panels going to make more of a difference, or is the fact that you have your 66 JTM up there as opposed to a mid-80s JCM 800 or does anybody freaking care?
And you can throw it on the plane and go straight over,
which we've done.
Yeah.
And we're doing next month. We already took the whole show. The whole show fits into 16 Pelican cases.
Wow, that's pretty good.
That includes all of our own mics, our monitoring console, our front of house console, everything.
You guys bring all of that.
Are you Are you using like any Avid stuff for
No.
No?
For console stuff, for live, we're using Midas and Behringer.
Cool. And just
Because that whole
recall
world, that X32 world and M32 world, I
Yeah.
don't know if you know that.
I do.
Yeah. That world is...
I don't spend too much time in that land, but I know it's making enough noise that I know about it.
Well, they really kind of... It caused a bit of a revolution because it's the functionality of what that stuff does.
I didn't believe it when people started telling me, like, F off. Whatever. Yeah. But no, it seems to be legit.
It's legit.
Yeah.
It sounds good. What it does for the money is absolutely mind-blowing.
Yeah.
We have a $1,000 monitor console, 32 by 16 monitor console on stage for $1,000.
Right, that
and
just
it-
recalls everything.
And you just go
Yeah.
boom,
Oh, yeah.
you're back to where you hit a button and you're exactly where you were the night before. In
We
2
just
3
have
seconds.
one scene, and it doesn't have... Now, that's the faderless version, right?
Right.
It's just a rack mount unit
Right.
with iPad control. So I have an iPad. I have 2 iPads attached to my mic stand. One has a set list with lyrics, and one has a virtual console on it, basically, with all the mixes for the 4 musicians. I'm doing it right there from my mic
Yeah,
stand.
so you can just lean over, boop, hit your iPad, and say, I want a little more guitar, a little less vocal, whatever.
I need a little more kick or
Yeah.
whatever, you know,
Yeah.
like a little more audience mics or a little less.
Oh, you guys put up audience mics too, so you don't feel like you're sitting in a bubble or
Yeah.
in a.
Yeah, it's pretty dry sometimes without the audience mics.
it's
You don't feel
very
like you're in a
awkward.
club.
Yeah, you feel like you're underwater, and kind of away from
I
everybody.
know, it's very awkward when you see everybody cheering and you're like, I don't hear it.
I mean, you could hear it, but it's not as impactful as if you have
Yeah,
those mics.
and you want to be able to enjoy the audience and interact with them.
Yeah,
and,
sure.
and
It's
work
nice.
off them. Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice to hear songs being called out, even though we don't play them. We might the next day.
Yeah. Right.
Right? You know?
You have to go and program them.
We'd have to go and it's just changing the set list on the fly is a bit of a problem
Yeah.
at this point. Because we have so many songs now. We're pulling from about 50 songs.
Yeah, and how many were on the new record?
12 full songs and
Your
6
segue?
segues.
Yeah.
So
Got a lot of. You got a pretty big catalog, man.
yeah, it's hard to make a 20-song set list where people aren't
How do you deal with?
disappointed.
How do you deal with bass live then? If you're doing everything in the in-ears, do you have bass fills up there, or are you doing anything like that, or are you just kind of, you know what I mean? Because
I know exactly what you mean.
you feel kind of with the in-ears, you don't have the energy from the bottom end pushing your body.
Actually, you do, because the PA is right there,
Right.
right? And generally, the subs are right under the stage.
Right.
And our sound guy mixes pretty loud.
Yeah.
So we can feel the PA.
Right.
So 90% of the time, it's providing what you want, like some nice subby, and it's sympathetic and working with the mix in our ears.
Mm-hmm.
Every once in a while, like last night at Anaheim HOB, House of Blues, the PA was so separated from the stage that it was a little bit of...
Odd.
The mix, for me, was slightly anemic.
Do you guys still use wedges?
We don't use wedges because it just takes too long to figure it out.
Right.
You know, because we have the ears in.
Yeah.
So you gotta take your ears out, get a wedge mix, put them back. Is that working? Because a lot of
Yeah.
times there's a phase problem between here and here.
Right, because you're getting this way quicker, obviously.
I never put vocals on any onstage speakers because they generally will conflict phase wise with the vocals in my ear.
Right.
But overall, it works out really well. We have had a little bit of an issue with not being able to get feedback from guitar.
Oh,
right?
yeah, that
'Cause we
makes
don't
sense.
have Marshall cabinets on stage.
Yeah, where are
which
you gonna go
feedback
to get it
really
from?
well with guitars. So it just so happened that a guitar company called Electrical Guitar Company, they make all aluminum guitars.
I think I've seen them.
They reached out to me about a year ago and said, hey, if I send you a guitar, would you be interested in owning it and having it? And they sent me one, and I was like, I love it. I think it's amazing. Like, the neck doesn't have to widen out at the base because it's metal. So
it
the
doesn't need the
playability up high, and we have a lot of high arpeggio stuff up here. became a lot easier to play live, so that was really nice. But the other fringe benefit of it is that they are super sensitive to SPL in the room, essentially. So we have 2 of them now. So if someone needs feedback in a song,
Pick up that.
pick up that guitar,
Yeah.
and it will feedback off the PA, even on a festival.
Really?
Yeah, just the proximity, and there's enough
it's vibrating it?
Yeah, there's enough vibrating it. And you could also do this cool thing where if you have open, your pots open, you can go over to the drum kit, and it's almost like a microphone on the drum kit.
Oh, weird.
And
You can get drums through your cabinet, through your head.
through your guitar. Yeah.
That's pretty cool,
So we
man.
kind of solved the feedback problem, and now it's just, and that listening back to the tracks because we record it every night. We're probably going to make a live album off of this year's tours.
Yeah.
And
Awesome.
the drum tracks literally have nothing but drums on them.
That's so rad.
It's
because
really
you're like, it's
rad.
almost like you're in the studio.
I mean,
and
you hear the
like
crowd in between. You hear the crowd in the distance.
But you want that anyways. when
Yeah,
you're-
so
when
it's
you're live
fine.
recording. Yeah. That's cool. That's cool.
So it's really cool. Yeah.
How's it feel like being back on the road and traveling and touring right now? It's a lot of work, I know, because I've been there. I've done it.
Yeah.
But you're at the end of your run now, right? So you got a couple days at home.
Happily.
Are you home tomorrow?
Be home. Yeah, tomorrow.
Tomorrow's Halloween.
Isn't it the next day?
No, the
Saturday.
next day's Halloween.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
So you're over Halloween.
because I have
Like,
to
holy
get
shit.
my costume together and everything because I got 2 little kids.
You gonna go
now,
trick or treating with the kids?
Oh, yeah.
Me
Uh-huh.
too. I got kids too doing the same thing. I'm looking forward to it. It's a lot of fun. It's way different than my Halloweens were about 15 years ago.
Yeah.
Very different. Very different, but just as awesome.
I try to limit the tours to my current agreement with our manager is 24 days.
Okay.
I tried to keep it to 21 days, 3 weeks. He's like, I need 4 weekends
Right.
if you're gonna go out.
Yeah, if you're gonna
Yeah.
head out, you got to get the extra weekend in.
You got to get the weekends in there because they're like more lucrative, basically.
Right.
So,
Easier to bring people out. That's when people are available, obviously.
And pretty much the touring industry is kind of operating on those shorter runs now. I find
Right.
we haven't had to really deal with like a band saying we want to take you out, but we need you to come for 3 months in a row.
Do you prefer it like that then?
No.
I mean, the short
prefer
version.
the short. Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
When
yeah.
you have little kids,
Yeah.
you miss a lot in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
You really do. So.
And you miss them too.
Yeah. That's been a little tough.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But thankfully, like our next 2 things are like we'll only be gone for a week at a time.
Cool.
Just going to Europe for a week and Australia for a week. That's fun.
I can't think of anything else I want to talk to you about. I just really appreciate you doing this, and hope you have a good show tonight.
Yeah, thanks.
And thanks a lot, Ken Andrews.
That was the end. Back just before I coughed. It fades out.
I'll note here, faded cough.